Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K209, the guide. First interesting thing about this episode is that it's the last episode of the entire series that's animated by Studio Pierrot. Everything else after this is Studio Mir. So that's interesting. I think this being the final one, my final thoughts on Studio Pierrot are that I really think it's such an over-exaggerated complaint about Book 2 that it has a different animation studio for half of its episodes. The quality is still high comparatively to anything else. It just so happens that we do have a different animation style. But again, I explained the reasoning behind why this happened and why I think it is a little unfair to kind of overly criticize them given the situation that led to them coming on board and the sort of negatives that sort of plants on the feet of Studio Mir. But I think overall, you know, it's not that bad. I think it only became sort of a real controversy because people heavily screenshotted these Studio Pierrot episodes to find the worst screens and, you know, compared them against like some of Korra's like the Mir episodes like best screens, which I think is a little bit unfair. But as I said, the quality seems perfectly fine to me. But yeah, this episode specifically, a lot going on here, and I think it's an interesting one because half of the episode is focused on the Mako plot with Varric, and it's actually very well done here because we've sort of got past, for the most part, a lot of the really annoying parts of the plot. Unfortunately, there still is aspects of the romance going on here in that it's still a big... What were they thinking with Asami and Mako and that relationship again? Because once Korra comes back into the group, it really just makes everything awkward. It makes Asami look bad. It makes Mako look bad. It makes the show just so romance drama focused that it's really, really unnecessary. But I like this moment here in that we see Mako getting framed. He ends up basically, despite being the one who's on track, he knows that Varric did this. He's the one who ends up getting framed and vilified for all of this stuff. That it's the biggest, you know, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen to Mako here. The last thing he ever wanted to happen is he wants to prove himself as a detective, but now Lin, you know, Lu and Gon, all of them come in here. They follow a different lead that came for the triple threats. Fun fact, you know, that they listened to what the triple threats had to say, but they ignored Mako's lead completely and just completely are willing to accept, you know, everything that's happened here. Obviously planted evidence is at play here that Mako has explosives in his apartment, but it's meant to be this Mako kind of falls really, really hard in these couple of episodes to the point where even like Asami has a couple of doubts about, you know, like, did he really do this? In that they're bringing up, I suppose, some of the ideas here of like, once a triple threat, always a triple threat, in that the brothers, Mako included, both have that history of being previous triple threat members. And is this just that coming back? Obviously, it doesn't look great that they did hire the triple threats for the sting, but the blatant lie of them saying that Mako helped them to steal from Asami is, you know, clearly where the problem is. And Varric obviously gives Mako sort of an out by saying, you know, like, join me, become my kind of like security advisor, basically, and, you know, this will all go away. But Mako, of course, wants the truth to come out. He wants to stay on the right side of the law and not just kind of just do everything Varric wants. And I like that he sticks to his guns, but it's a low moment for him here as he's taken away to basically be kind of put in jail effectively. But still, I think it's an episode that plays an important role of just seeing no one listens to Mako plot really build and build and build, and it eventually is going to pay off really, really well once it comes out that he was actually right about this the entire time and no one listened to him. And there's a sense of like the growth after this point is that we should sort of respect Mako when it comes to these matters. It's just that the writers tended to take the opposite road with that and not really use him all that much in the upcoming 2 seasons. But the other side plot that we get here is Unalaq, Eska, and Desna going into the spirit world to try and open the northern spirit portal from the inside. With the idea being that Unalaq feels that, okay, if the spirits can't break it, maybe we can with our bending. That's the one thing that spirits really don't have. It's an ability, it's a power that they can't have. Maybe this will allow us to do it. 3 powerful waterbenders. Maybe we'll be able to break down the kind of barrier around the portal. It doesn't end up working, but you can see the desperation from Unalaq, and especially with the scene with Vatu at the end. You can tell that this is, Unalaq felt that his whole plan had failed here because he kind of let Korra go away. His manipulation of her ended up kind of falling apart. He couldn't control her completely. And then Eska and Desna sort of mishandled the whole situation with Korra getting, hurt by the dark spirit. But it's this moment of desperation where you see how much effort he puts in to try and open the portal. Eska and Desna getting involved as well. But Desna getting hurt here very clearly, to the point where Eska says that he actually does need a healer. I think it's a very telling moment where he doesn't care at all about his family. He only cares about the mission. He only cares about spirits, Vatu specifically, and his plan. And that's I think the core here with Unalaq, is that he's this character who's sort of left his humanity behind him. He doesn't have it anymore because he cares about the spirits above all else. And the fact that even Eska, who's sort of shown that she can be somewhat cruel to a degree, even she stops everything to kind of help her brother and knows that he needs a healer and takes him out of the spirit world because he's basically unconscious. She knows that that's, a problem, and it's the first, I suppose, crack in the kind of relationship here of, I don't think we've got it just yet. I think it happens in one of the next episodes, but the idea that we come to learn that Eska and Desna really heavily look up to their father. They see him as one of the greatest men in the world, someone that should be very much respected, and the idea that Korra would ask them to kind of go against him is something they can't really see, but this is something that comes to mind. It is the first crack in that relationship, that he's not letting them in on everything. There's been stuff before, they were shocked to see that he went into the spirit world and didn't tell them that the portal was open and that they could go in and out. Now, the whole idea of, him not caring that Desna got hurt, it's a pretty big issue. And obviously that leaves Unalaq on his own, and he basically kind of goes up to Vatu and is just I failed. It's over. The Avatar is dead. But Vatu, of course, because he has a connection with Rava, knows that she's still alive. And then because of what happens in the main plot, he knows that they're coming to you. She's just entered the spirit world. Now is your chance to, finish what you've started. They're trying to close the other portal. You need to act now and force her to open the other portal and get the full victory here as harmonic convergence approaches. This is where the big plot really comes out, that just finding out that, okay, Unalaq has been working with Vatu to free him. Just that as the plot point wasn't quite said at the end of the beginnings, but is made clear here that is the ultimate plan, is to free Vatu by harmonic convergence actually happening. It's obviously next episode where we get the full technical details about why he wouldn't have been freed if harmonic convergence had arrived. But still, interesting stuff. The main plot is excellent in this episode. It's a very, very strong Tenzin episode, and it's Jinora, the extra focus on Jinora this season, coming back into the forefront. She had that initial thing in the first couple of episodes, then she sort of faded away again. Now it's her big episode to show this kind of hidden skill that she has. And I love how they do this, because the episode's obviously called The Guide. And the entire start of the episode is Tenzin is going to guide Korra now that they're back together. And he's going to guide her into the spirit world as her spiritual guide. But then Kaya basically discovers that Jinora is the one who's actually really, really spiritual. And just the revelation from everyone, the realization, it has to be Jinora. Even though she's still very young, and Tenzin is still, I suppose, treating her like a child still. He knows he kind of has to give up on his dream of being the one to guide the Avatar into the spirit world. And he has to basically give that to his daughter here and accept a couple of things, that he isn't spiritual. He can't help Korra in that way. It's just not something he has. He knows technical stuff about the spirit world because he has good historical knowledge. He's looked into it a lot. He's read all the books, done all the research about this is something that should help, but he just doesn't have that raw connection with the spirit world like Jinora does, and like kind of Korra does to a degree by default by being the Avatar. I thought that was a really big revelation where he's forced to admit, after all of the kind of failed attempts to go into the spirit world, I've never been there before. It's my greatest failure as a person, basically. I failed Korra, myself, the airbenders, and Aang especially. And obviously we know that Aang wouldn't really feel that way, just because it's not something that Tenzin has really much control over. But it's still a notable reveal that he tried to force it here. And you can tell that the frustration came from this personal sense of failure, that he couldn't make this work. And so the fact that it's Jinora as this other idea of his daughter is the one who has to go on this mission. And there's a certain danger to that because the spirit world is such an unpredictable place. Because Tenzin knows the kind of technical details, he knows how dangerous it can be, and the fact that he sort of has to risk his daughter to make this happen is a moment of kind of growth that he has to go through, of accepting that his kids are going to be put in positions where they have to have all this responsibility, sometimes danger being kind of thrust upon them. And we see it a bit more in next season with the Tenzin Jinora arc, but here's the kind of the first step of him, not just seeing his three kids as they are children, but actually having to accept that Jinora has this amazing skill that pretty much makes her one of the most spiritual people in the world at this point in time. And there's definitely especially what they do by the end of the season, there is absolutely, I think it's absolutely worthwhile saying she could be the most spiritual person in the world. Because just to see her as the only person here who's able to see the spirits, and the Avatar is there, Boomy, who's revealed to also be quite spiritual, he can't see them by default. The spirit sort of trusts Jinora, and it has to be her kind of telling them that you can reveal yourself, that kind of shows them off to everyone, which I think is something that should be noted, that she's sort of able to command the spirits to a degree, because it sort of becomes an aspect of a plot point in the final episode of what Jinora actually does with regards to how the final battle actually comes to a conclusion, is that Jinora's deep connection to the spirits allows her to, more or less, keep light spirits around her and kind of keep them free from the kind of the darkness that is kind of encroaching and affecting all spirits. Because that's what we see here. The spirits that are there guide Korra and everyone to this specific spot that is, I suppose, perfect for meditating to enter the spirit world. But it's sort of infested by dark spirits, and it's sort of, the balance of spirit energy is sort of off. And this is where I like how they kind of use Tenzin well, in that he knows a specific ritual where it's just using bending to sort of help to kind of purify and bring the kind of the issue to light in this area. But he's fundamentally not doing anything spiritual. He's just drawing out the darkness, and it's left for Korra to actually have her big moment here, where she finally shows her growth as a spiritual character here, when she finally uses the spirit bending technique effectively to purify and alter the spirit energies of these kind of dark bat spirits. She's attempted it obviously 2 times before. It hasn't worked, but here we see it, her get it right, and it's a really cool scene. All of the spirit bending scenes in book 2 and the entire series, I think, are really, really well done, because it gets across it's a spiritual technique, because it's got no battle applications fundamentally outside of, I suppose, the fact that you do end up getting rid of a spirit, and then if you do the dark version of it, you do end up destroying a spirit. But it's not a combat ability. There's a certain kind of beauty to the way the kind of technique works, and they do a good job with the animation and music of showing that every time she uses it, it is this different technique. It is something to kind of be in awe of, and that Kaya, I suppose, seeing her for like the first time, is amazed that Korra can do this. And this is, I think, where there's a very interesting conversation in the episode that comes up here, which is, it's basically like Korra apologizing to Tenzin for kind of like abandoning him in terms of him being her mentor. But it's also this admittance of like, from Tenzin's, that like, I think it's the show acknowledging the fact that yes, Korra was sort of tricked by Unalaq. Everything he thought her was to ultimately get his goals to the way he needed them to be. But that fundamentally, even though he was wrong in what he did and had kind of ill intentions, Unalaq is spiritual enough of a character that he did just honestly teach Korra some very, very good things about being spiritual. That technique is something that's it sort of becomes somewhat of a signature technique for Korra in terms of how she kind of ends up dealing with spirits, and it's something that Tenzin could never have taught her. I don't think it's an ability she would have ever been able to learn on her own. It took her learning it from, I suppose it's basically implied that Unalaq is the person who invented this technique, and so that sense of there must have been a point in Unalaq's life where he was just a truly spiritual person, but had things the right way. And then what really shifted it to him kind of taking it so far. And obviously I think that's meant to be the Red Lotus, as we more or less find out. But that Korra basically leaves just before she starts to learn about, I suppose, the kind of corrupted spiritual ideals of Unalaq. And so she ends up getting the net benefit of learning a lot of things spiritually from him, learning little things from Tenzin, and then really gaining a deep connection to the spirit world from Jinora. And all these kind of 3 characters kind of together, basically end up being very important teachers to Korra in terms of either directly teaching her, personally teaching her, or guiding her in Jinora's case. And how Korra does apologize to Tenzin here, and just says that, Unalaq taught me this stuff, but he never cared about me. You do, and she should have realized that. She should have realized all of this kind of sooner. But I think there's definitely a sense, I think, from both Tenzin and Korra that they both realize that for Korra to get to this point where she is, in a way for Tenzin to get to this point as well, where he can accept that like Jinora has to be Korra's spiritual guide. Everything that happened had to happen. She had to learn what she learned from Unalaq and come here as a more kind of complete spiritual character to, gain the benefit that Jinora can kind of teach her. And it's a big moment because like even after you have this like initial moment of like the cleansing of this kind of specific area of the air temple, and you still have Tenzin kind of feeling that, okay, now that we've opened this kind of spiritual sort of rift in a way, this kind of place that absolutely is going to be one of the best places to meditate in. Now I can do it again. He kind of tries to do it again, but has to accept come the end of the episode that it is Jinora who has to be the one to kind of guide her in. And there's a nice moment between Jinora and her father where it's the hug, and it's Tenzin kind of accepting that his daughter has this role to play, but it's also, in a way, Jinora kind of like apologizing that she never wanted to sort of like outshine Tenzin in a way like this, but that she knows that this is the role that she has to play to guide Korra here. And it's really shown very well when, without much time at all passing, they do manage to meditate into the spirit world. And it's a very nice and bright looking area of the spirit world, different than we've really seen for the most part. But just establishing that the spirit world is a very big place. It's not the murky kind of swampy type area that we saw most of the times we went there in Avatar. This is very, very different. It's a much brighter area, which I think was sort of hinted at in some of the little spiritual kind of moments we got in Avatar, but just showing us that it's a more kind of complete landscape in a way than you would expect. But we'll see more of that in the next episode. But yeah, I think that's most of what I want to say about this episode. I think it's a really good kind of transition moment coming out of Beginnings, and then I suppose going into like the finale stuff. You get this in the next episode before we're basically into, more or less the 4-part finale of book 2, and I think it plays its role very well in terms of obviously getting Korra back with Tenzin's group, getting Mako to a position where he's out of the picture for now. So Varrick is sort of like completely unchecked by anyone. The police force isn't really onto him. Asami was defending Varrick in this episode earlier on. Similarly, Bolin, I think, right now isn't having any doubts about Varrick. So it's kind of left for, you would assume at this point, those two to have some sort of a turnaround on Varrick and save the day, which is what they do. They just do it with Bolin and not with Asami. And I think this is where perhaps they maybe could have used Asami a little bit more, in that they almost have Asami as a character give up on Mako and just kind of go all in with Varrick. Not that she like completely defends him for like the whole rest of the season, but that it's just a sense of she more or less, everything is solved because of the discovery that Bolin makes, and it's not really Asami kind of playing an active role in getting her company back as such. They put it all on Bolin, whereas I feel they maybe could have spread that out a little bit more, but we'll get to that when we discuss those specific scenes. But it's just where this episode sort of leaves the series, I think, is in a very good place where we're going to get to see a lot of spirit world stuff, but we know there's a threat. It's not just going to be a happy exploration of the spirit world. We know Unalaq is there. He has his bending. Korra has meditated in, so she doesn't have bending. There's a sense of like Jinora knows more about the spirit world, but it's still her first time in there as well, even though she's a more spiritual person. So how's that going? How's that dynamic going to work? Korra having to protect Jinora, but Jinora in a way having to protect Korra because she's the more spiritual one. And then just everything, I suppose, like building towards one of the more kind of climactic kind of finales in all of Avatar, because this is the big one. It's harmonic convergence, it's darkness taking over the world, it's bigger than basically anything we've had so far. But yeah, solid episode. Perhaps not as much depth to this one as some of the previous ones, especially Beginnings, but still plays its role very, very, very well, and we'll get into another very unique episode next time out with a new spiritual age. But yeah, that's been the video for today. Thanks for watching, and bye.